There are objects that anchor a person to this world. A key, a birth certificate, a passport. His passport looked authentic. The paper had the right heft. The ink stamps inside told a story of arrivals and departures spanning the last 5 years. Every detail was flawless, save for one: the country that had issued it, a place called Taured, a nation with no land, no flag, no mark on any map ever made by man. And yet, here was its citizen, standing in the middle of a Tokyo airport in 1954, clutching proof of a home that was nowhere to be found. And soon, like his country, he too would vanish, leaving behind nothing but an impossible silence. Greetings, everyone. I have to report that I'll be away this upcoming weekend, which is going to throw a bit of a wrench in our usual schedule. I was originally planning to start recording new material then, but being gone for a few days would mean too long of a break. So, I figured it was essential to dive into some of your suggestions now. I'm going to try and get 2 or 3 videos out by the end of this week, and I'll finish up the rest when I get back from my trip. As always, thank you for the ideas, and please, keep them coming. I'll be able to review new topics throughout this week and the next. Today's story is the perfect example of what I look for in your suggestions. Something original, captivating, and intensely intriguing. It's the kind of story I'm dying to share with all of you, my loyal viewers, so we can all experience this amazing material together. We're talking about the urban legend known as the Man from Taured. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Taured is spelled Taured, so I'm just sounding it out. But I can tell you this: the second I read this story, I knew I had to share it with all of you immediately. So, who was this man from Taured? To find the answer, we have to travel back a few decades, specifically to the year 1954. This isn't some recent event. It's a single incident whose echoes, however, have reverberated through the decades. And we're not just going back to 1954, but to a specific place, a Tokyo airport in Japan. Here's what went down on an otherwise ordinary day that year. The airport was a hive of activity. Schedules were packed, people were bustling everywhere, business deals were being made. An endless stream of passengers, some flying out, others flying in, still others waiting for their connections. And amidst all this chaos, one passenger drew some unwanted attention, not because of how he looked or acted, but because of what he presented at customs. It's standard procedure for arriving passengers, especially from other countries, to go through customs and present identification, usually a passport. And when this particular passenger handed his over, everything came to a sudden halt. Again, there was nothing unusual about his appearance. Eyewitnesses described him as a tall, Caucasian-looking man, perhaps European, of a perfectly average build. There was nothing remarkable about him. He looked like your run-of-the-mill guy of his race. What's more, he spoke Japanese fluently. There were no communication barriers, no issues with dialect or misunderstanding. He had a perfect command of the language, which only deepened the mystery of it all. The reason everything ground to a stop was his passport. The document was unlike any the airport staff had ever seen. It had been issued by a country called Taured. Again, Taured. Now, I've never heard of Taured, and I'm willing to bet you haven't either. But there he was, presenting a document that looked 100% authentic. As official as a passport can get. Those of you who have a passport know what I'm talking about. Even if you've just seen them, you get it. They have a certain look. They're made of a specific material. They have distinct holograms and markings depending on the country of origin. They have a whole aesthetic, a specific look and feel, and this passport didn't seem out of place. But what truly stood out was the issuing country, Taured. When one of the agents asked the man where Taured was, he replied in his flawless Japanese that Taured was a small nation in Europe, nestled cozily between France and Spain. But even with that explanation, the agent was still drawing a blank. Of course he was. Like you and me, he'd never heard of such a country. So, already starting to think this man was a bit off, they unfurled a map in front of him and said, "Show us where Taured is." The man pointed to a spot in the region of Spain, right where you'd expect to find the Principality of Andorra. That, he claimed, was where Taured should be. This only made things more confusing, because the customs officers realized there was no country called Taured there, and even if it were inside Spain, they would have definitely heard of it. Apparently, they showed him other maps, but he stubbornly pointed to the same spot. And now, it wasn't just the agents who were baffled. The man himself was getting flustered, realizing that his homeland, Taured, wasn't on a single map they presented. And he didn't just have a passport as proof. They must have asked for other documents, because he produced a driver's license, also issued in Taured. Then, it seems he had business papers with him. He was likely on a work trip, because he was able to show them bank statements and various commercial documents that looked completely official, and all of them listed Taured as the country of origin. Everything he showed them looked 100% legitimate. You have to remember, this was 1954. This was a time before Photoshop, a time when people couldn't just mock up a fake document, be it a bank statement or a utility bill. You couldn't just scan, copy, and paste things onto paper and print it out. Instead, he was presenting documents that looked and felt as official as any real bank statement, driver's license, or passport should, and every single one of them said the same thing: Taured. And here he was, with all this paperwork, yet no one could confirm his country's existence. And he was starting to realize it himself. As the story goes, after he presented all his documents, a chilling silence fell over the interrogation room as the man absorbed the reality of his situation. The customs agents took him to an interrogation room and held him there for a good long while, about 8 hours. They asked him questions, and he answered to the best of his ability, providing information about his country. He claimed he had been traveling from Taured to Japan for the last 5 years without a single issue. And the proof of this, and this is the most mind-boggling part of the story, was right there in his passport. When he showed it to them, the agents could clearly see the pages were peppered with official entry stamps placed there every time he had arrived in Japan. Presumably, it was the same stamp they would have put in any other passenger's passport, an American's, a Russian's, anyone's. But here he was, with a passport from Taured, showing the very same stamps from the past 5 years, never once having a problem. It's astounding, because how could you get that kind of proof? There's only one way: by passing through customs each time, where an agent inspects the passport, stamps it, and waves you through. Furthermore, he provided the phone number of the company he worked for, since he was apparently on a business trip. The agents called the number, only to find that no such company existed. This was despite the fact that he likely had documents with him confirming his visit was related to business with this firm. And so, they were at another dead end. A man presenting all sorts of identification from a country no one had ever heard of, and documents from a company that, it turned out, didn't exist. Eventually, they hit a wall. The decision was made to put the man up in a hotel for the night, while they figured out what to do with him. He wasn't considered a threat at that point, it seems, as he hadn't shown any aggressive intent. He was just in a situation where he couldn't prove who he was. The authorities decided to play it safe. Better safe than sorry. They could place him in a hotel room, keep him there, and investigate further to figure out what the hell was going on. The hotel, and this is another interesting facet of the legend, was located near the airport. He was escorted there by both customs agents and the police, who had obviously gotten involved by then. They wanted to make sure this mystery man wasn't a danger. They put him in a room, but here's the kicker. It was several stories off the ground. What's more, it was a room with no balcony, with no way out except for the main door. Nothing like those rooms where you can slide open a door onto a patio and take in the city. It was just a room and a standard window. That's it. This was undoubtedly a deliberate measure to prevent any chance of escape. But the most interesting part happened the next morning. When the same officials went to his room and opened the door, they found he was gone. He had vanished into thin air. Not a single trace of him was left in the room. They searched everywhere, but he wasn't there. There was no way he could have escaped. The room was high up. There was no balcony. And if he had jumped from the window, he either wouldn't have survived or would have certainly been noticed falling in a busy area, like the grounds of an airport. Someone would have seen something. Someone would have raised the alarm about an escape attempt. So you can throw that idea right out the window. What's more, guards were posted outside his door all night. The story I read says the guards, plural, meaning there was more than one of them, swore they never saw or heard a peep out of him after that door was shut. Nobody saw him leave. Nobody even heard him make a sound inside. Not a shuffle, no drilling, no sound of him trying to bust through a wall. None of the things you'd expect from a guy trying to break out of a locked room with nothing but the clothes on his back. The idea that he just vanished. Now that is the cherry on top of this whole crazy story. A mysterious man shows up at an airport, presents perfectly legitimate papers from a country that doesn't exist, gets escorted to a hotel, and by the next morning, he's gone, vanished without a trace. The trail goes cold right there. He vanished just as mysteriously as he'd appeared in that Tokyo airport. So, who was this man from Taured? The prevailing theory goes that he was a real person, a flesh and blood human being, just like you and me. But here's the kicker. Somehow, this man was from a parallel dimension. And for whatever reason, one day a portal opened up in his dimension, or some random glitch in the matrix happened, and it spat him out into our reality. Think of it like the DC Comics multiverse, with all its different Earths, each with its own version of the same people. You know, a Bruce Wayne on Earth 1, another Bruce Wayne on Earth 2, and on and on. So this guy, whoever he was just living his life in his own universe, in a country called Taured, when, poof, he suddenly found himself in ours. And just as fast as he got here, he was yanked right back. Maybe the dimensions self-corrected, or maybe that portal, or whatever it was, opened back up and sucked him right back where he belonged. That's the leading theory anyway. This sounds a lot like that story I covered a while back. You should check out that video, it's a pretty popular one, about the time-traveling hipster. The idea there is that this guy, whether on purpose or by accident, somehow slipped into a different time period. Maybe the man from Taured was the same deal, only instead of time, it was space. He was on his Earth, then he was on our Earth, and then he was gone again. But again, these are just theories. There's zero proof. In fact, there's no real evidence the story ever even happened. Nothing in the airport logs. Nothing in the hotel records where it all supposedly went down. By all accounts, it seems to be just an urban legend that sprang up in the area, because if it did happen, not a single newspaper breathed a word about it, or on any TV shows from that time period. This was a story that seems to have been born purely from word of mouth, taking on a life of its own as it was passed from person to person. It popped up in 1954 and has been kicking around ever since, maybe even to this day. And that is the legend of the man from Taured. So, has anyone else out there heard of this bizarre urban legend? Does anyone know of any other incidents involving this mystery man? If you do, we want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts and stories in the comments below. We can only hope that one day some real, hard evidence will surface. Because if this thing really did go down, just think of all the people he would have come into contact with: customs agents, police officers, hotel staff, you name it. And given this all happened back in 1954, it's not impossible that some of those witnesses could still be alive today, able to corroborate the story. So we're holding out hope that one day those accounts will emerge, and people will be able to come forward with what they really saw, what they really experienced when they met the man from Taured. All right, that's all for this one. As always, thanks for tuning in. Stay safe out there.